Welfare states rarely collapse with protests in the streets or dramatic announcements from government leaders. They do not fail loudly. They fail quietly, internally, over time. And by the time most citizens realize something is wrong, the system they trusted for decades is already beyond repair. This is why welfare states almost always collapse from within. Not because of malice, but because of structural contradictions they can no longer resolve. If you are over 55, you remember when the welfare state was modest, targeted, and financially manageable. It was designed as a safety net, not a way of life. Assistance existed to help people through hardship, not to replace responsibility permanently. That original balance is what made welfare systems politically acceptable and economically sustainable. But welfare states rarely stay small. The first internal pressure that leads to collapse is expansion without limits. Every welfare program begins with narrow eligibility and moral clarity. Over time, political incentives push expansion. Eligibility widens. Benefits increase, temporary measures become permanent. New programs are layered on top of old ones. Each expansion is justified as compassionate. Very few are evaluated for long-term sustainability. This gradual expansion creates an illusion of stability. Costs rise slowly at first. Governments finance them through higher taxes, borrowing, or inflation. The system appears to work, until demographics, debt, and productivity catch up. Demographics are the silent enemy of welfare states. Most welfare systems were designed when populations were young, birth rates were high, and life expectancy was lower. Today, those conditions no longer exist. Populations are aging, fewer workers support more retirees. Healthcare and pension costs rise relentlessly. The math becomes unforgiving. A welfare state can survive inefficiency. It cannot survive demographic reality. As the dependency ratio worsens, governments face impossible choices. Raise taxes on a shrinking workforce, cut benefits to a growing dependent population, or borrow and print money to delay conflict. Most choose delay. That delay is the beginning of collapse. The second internal pressure is incentive erosion. Welfare states change behavior, not because people are immoral, but because incentives matter. When benefits approach or exceed the value of work, labor participation declines. When taxes punish productivity, effort decreases. When risk-taking is penalized, innovation slows. This is not theory, it is observable reality. As fewer people produce and more people depend, the tax base erodes. Governments respond by raising rates, which further discourages work and investment. The system enters a feedback loop. Declining productivity leads to higher taxes, which lead to lower productivity. Collapse does not come suddenly. It comes as stagnation. The third pressure is fiscal illusion. Welfare states rely on the belief that government can always fund promises. Politicians reinforce this illusion by separating benefits from costs. Citizens receive services without seeing the bill directly. Debt obscures reality. Inflation hides taxation. The system feels affordable until it isn't. Once debt reaches a critical mass, welfare states lose flexibility. Interest payments crowd out services, markets lose confidence, borrowing becomes more expensive. At that point, cuts are no longer choices, they are imposed by reality. This is when welfare states face their most dangerous moment. Expectations remain high, but resources disappear. Another internal failure lies in institutional capture. Large welfare systems require large bureaucracies. Over time, these institutions develop self-preservation instincts. Programs exist because agencies exist. Success is measured by budget size, not outcomes. Reform threatens jobs, status, and power. As a result, welfare states become resistant to evaluation. Programs that fail continue. Programs that succeed expand beyond their original purpose. Accountability erodes. Efficiency becomes irrelevant. The public senses this dysfunction, but struggles to identify its cause. Frustration grows. Trust declines. Welfare states also suffer from moral overload. When the state becomes responsible for outcomes, income, health, housing, education, failure becomes personal. Every shortfall feels like betrayal. Citizens stop seeing the state as a referee and begin seeing it as a provider that never delivers enough. This creates permanent dissatisfaction. Paradoxically, the more a welfare state promises, the less legitimacy it retains. Expectations grow faster than capacity. Collapse becomes a crisis of trust as much as finance. History offers clear examples. In Europe, generous welfare states expanded rapidly during decades of growth. When growth slowed, structural weaknesses were exposed. Youth unemployment soared, debt exploded. Governments oscillated between austerity and stimulus, unable to reform core entitlements without backlash. In Latin America, welfare expansion combined with weak institutions produced chronic inflation and instability. Promises were funded through money creation. Purchasing power collapsed. The welfare state survived on paper, but failed in reality. Even the most admired welfare systems face internal strain. High taxes suppress growth. Aging populations strain pensions. Immigration creates political tension. Reform becomes toxic. The welfare state does not collapse because people stop caring. It collapses because caring is not enough to overcome arithmetic. For older Americans, this matters deeply. Welfare state expansion places long-term pressure on savings, inflation, and taxation. Promises made today are paid for tomorrow, often by retirees through reduced purchasing power. The system that claims to protect quietly consumes accumulated wealth. This is why welfare states rarely end with votes. They end with defaults, inflation, or forced reform. Collapse arrives when internal contradictions become impossible to manage. Breaking the cycle requires confronting uncomfortable truths. Welfare systems must be limited, targeted, and linked to productivity. Benefits must be affordable. Incentives must reward work. Demographics must be acknowledged. Promises must match resources. Most importantly, the state must return to its proper role, protector of rules, not provider of outcomes. Welfare states collapse from within because they promise certainty in a world governed by scarcity. They replace responsibility with entitlement and hope to sustain it indefinitely. That hope always fails. Compassion without limits becomes fragility. Security without productivity becomes illusion. And systems built on illusion do not collapse dramatically. They decay quietly until nothing remains to support them. That is how welfare states fall, not by attack, but by contradiction.